On a quiet street corner, a barefoot boy clutched a broken guitar. His clothes were torn, his eyes heavy with pain, yet inside him lived a voice the world had never heard. When he whispered the first chords of Hotel California, strangers stopped, and tears began to fall. The night was cold, sharper than usual, and the streets of the small town seemed forgotten by the world. Streetlights flickered weakly, as though even they were too weary to keep shining. In front of an old cafe, whose doors had closed hours earlier, sat a boy, thin, fragile, and shivering in the biting wind. He hugged an old guitar against his chest, not for its music at that moment, but for warmth, as though it were the only friend he had left in the world. His name was Daniel, though few people ever bothered to ask. To most passers-by, he was simply that poor boy who wandered the streets barefoot, wearing the same torn shirt day after day. He looked no older than 15, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived 100 years of pain. Life had not been kind to him. His father had walked out before Daniel was old enough to remember his face, leaving his mother to fight alone. She scrubbed floors and washed clothes in wealthy homes, struggling just to put food on the table. But fate can be cruel. When illness struck her, the little money she made vanished into medicine that rarely helped. Some days, Daniel went hungry so she could eat. Other days, they both went without. And yet, inside this broken boy lived something extraordinary: music. One evening, while wandering down an alley, he had seen a guitar tossed in a pile of trash. Its body was cracked, its strings tangled and missing. But to Daniel, it was not garbage, it was hope. He carried it home like treasure. He didn't have lessons, teachers, or YouTube tutorials. All he had was his heart. Slowly, painfully, he taught himself to play, listening to old songs drifting from cafe radios and practicing until his fingers bled. Music became his escape, his safe place, the one corner of the world where pain transformed into something beautiful. When his mother coughed at night, he strummed soft lullabies to ease her to sleep. When his stomach ached from hunger, he played to forget. And when loneliness overwhelmed him, his guitar became the only friend who listened. But this night felt different. Daniel didn't know why, but something inside him whispered that tonight, his voice needed to be heard. He sat on the cafe steps, hugging the broken guitar close. People walked by, some glanced at him with pity, others ignored him as though he were invisible. A couple of teenagers laughed, pointing at his bare feet, before moving on. To them, he was just another poor boy with no future. Daniel lowered his head. For a moment, he thought of leaving, of saving himself from more humiliation. But then, something stronger stirred inside him, a courage he didn't know he had. With trembling fingers, he adjusted the few strings still clinging to the old guitar. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let his soul pour out through the haunting opening chords of Hotel California. The sound that rose from the broken guitar was raw, imperfect, but it carried a kind of beauty no one expected. His voice followed, soft at first, shaky and uncertain. But within seconds, it grew stronger, richer, filled with a pain and honesty that struck directly into the hearts of those who heard it. People began to stop. At first, just a curious old man who paused near the cafe door. Then a young woman carrying groceries set her bags down, her eyes locked on the boy. One by one, strangers gathered, their footsteps slowing, their conversations fading. Soon, a small circle had formed around him. Daniel didn't see them, his eyes were still closed, his soul lost in the song. Every lyric carried a piece of his story, every note a reflection of the struggles he could never put into words. The crowd listened in silence. Some held their breath, some wiped away tears, and for the first time in his life, Daniel was no longer invisible. His voice, fragile yet powerful, had become the voice of every broken dream, every hidden sorrow, and every spark of hope that refused to die. The sound of Daniel's trembling voice carried through the night like a prayer the world didn't know it was waiting for. Each chord of Hotel California seemed to rise above the cold air, weaving a story of pain and beauty all at once. People who had only planned to walk past without noticing now found themselves frozen in place, unable to leave. An elderly woman in the crowd clutched her chest as tears streamed down her face. She whispered, "This reminds me of my son. He used to sing this song before he left for war." A young man nearby nodded silently, his own eyes glistening, as if the song had reached into the very wounds he had kept hidden from the world. Phones began to lift into the air. Someone recorded, another shared live on social media. Within minutes, Comments began pouring in. Who is this boy? This is the most soulful Hotel California I've ever heard. I'm crying right now. The digital world was colliding with the quiet street corner, and without Daniel knowing, his voice had begun to travel far beyond the crowd before him. But the boy himself remained lost inside the music. Every note was a confession, every lyric a cry from the life he had endured. He remembered the nights he went to bed hungry, the mornings he walked barefoot to school only to be mocked by classmates, the moments when his mother whispered apologies for not being able to give him more. All of that pain melted into the melody. And then, something unexpected happened. A man in the crowd, dressed in a sharp suit, pushed his way forward. He was the owner of the cafe Daniel sat beside, a man known in town for being strict, cold, and never generous. Normally, he would have shooed the boy away for disturbing customers. But tonight, he stood still, his eyes fixed on the boy, his hands trembling as he held his phone to record. For the first time, people saw tears forming in his eyes. When the final chords echoed into the night, silence fell. It wasn't the silence of emptiness, but the silence of hearts too moved to speak. And then, like a wave, applause erupted. People clapped, some shouted, "Bravo!" Others wiped their eyes openly, not ashamed of their emotions. Daniel slowly opened his eyes. He had expected laughter, rejection, maybe even anger. Instead, he was met with faces glowing with admiration and compassion. He didn't know it yet, but in those few minutes, his life had changed forever. The cafe owner stepped forward, clearing his throat. His voice shook as he said, "Son, would you sing inside my cafe tomorrow night? I'll pay you." The crowd gasped. Daniel's hands trembled as he hugged his broken guitar tighter. Never in his life had anyone offered him such kindness. For the first time, hope flickered not just in his heart, but in the hearts of everyone watching. The poor boy had sung not just a song, but a miracle into existence. That night, Daniel walked home with his broken guitar pressed against his chest, but for the first time, his steps felt lighter. He told his sick mother about the crowd, the applause, and the cafe owner's invitation. Her tired eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of pride. She gently placed her trembling hand on his cheek and whispered, "Your voice is your gift, Daniel. Never stop sharing it." The very next evening, Daniel walked into the cafe. He was nervous, his clothes still torn, his guitar still broken. But when he sat on the small stage and strummed those first familiar chords, something magical happened. The cafe filled to the brim, locals, strangers, and even journalists who had heard about the poor boy with the golden voice. Phones recorded every moment. Within hours, his performance was shared millions of times online. The world began to listen. Comments flooded in from across oceans. "This boy saved me tonight. His voice healed something in me. I can't stop crying." Soon, news channels picked up the story. "Homeless boy sings Hotel California, brings the world to tears." Invitations poured in. Music producers reached out. Donations arrived for his mother's treatment. And the cafe owner, once known as a cold-hearted businessman, kept his promise, giving Daniel a stage every night until bigger stages came calling. But for Daniel, none of it was about fame or money. It was about something far greater. He had lived invisible for so long, unseen and unheard. And now, through one broken guitar and a song, the world finally saw him, not as a poor boy, but as a soul with a gift powerful enough to heal. Months later, Daniel stood on a grand stage, lights blazing, a crowd of thousands before him. His clothes were new, his guitar repaired, but his heart remained the same. He strummed the opening chords of Hotel California once more. This time, when he sang, the whole arena sang with him. Tears rolled down faces across the world as the livestream reached millions. And as Daniel finished the final note, he looked upward, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude, for his mother, for the strangers who believed in him, and for the power of music that turned his pain into hope. That night, the world didn't just hear a song. It heard a story of survival, of courage, and of love. The poor boy who once sang on a cold street corner had given the world something it could never forget, proof that even in the darkest places, light can rise, and one voice can move millions to tears. Never underestimate the power of kindness, of compassion, or of a single voice. Sometimes, the smallest spark in the most broken place can set the entire world alight.